I don't have some gifted insight. I don't claim to have all the answers to anything. If I come off saying people should do this, if you think I'm being egotistical, believing that I am the right answers, no, I just see the world the way that I see it. And it works for me, and I'll share it with you. I've had a very strange life. I've been in the chemical enterprises for over 30 years. The first 10 years of my professional life, I was an industrial chemist at Polaroid. The second 12 years of my industrial life, I was an academic, teaching at UMass. The third decade, I've been an entrepreneur, doing various things, starting companies and inventing. And over the 30 years, I've been involved in many government organizations. 3 weeks ago, I testified to the United States House of Representatives on sustainability and chemistry. In California, I served as the chair of the Chemicals Policy Committee in the European Union. I'm an advisor to the European REACH legislation. So as an inventor chemist, I've kind of been able to see chemistry from the doing chemistry, teaching chemistry, inventing chemistry, and managing chemistry, and which really to have a sustainable future, there are changes that are going to ultimately have to be made in each of these areas. I started initially as an undergraduate in the University of Massachusetts, Boston, very close to my home. I'm actually a first-generation college student and a huge family, I had 30 cousins that were carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and I made my parents angry by saying I wanted to go to university. I worked full-time, paid my own tuition, and went and became a chemist. I was very lucky, won many awards as an undergraduate. The magazine, Celebrity Magazine, put me on the cover and called me Boston's best and brightest college graduate. So I think chemistry seemed to work for me. Next thing, I worked at the Princeton University, worked with a group of people with E.C. Taylor, published about 12 papers on the design and synthesis of an anti-cancer chemotherapeutic drug. That the obviously a multi-step synthesis, in which was finally commercialized as a Alimta by the Eli Lilly company. If anyone has been to the Princeton campus now, there is a 5-year-old molecular biology building and a 3-year-old chemistry building. Beautiful, beautiful facilities, all built on the proceeds and financing from this one pharmaceutical. I had every expectation to go into academia. I was planning to go to academia. I had 2 appointments without any postdocs out of graduate school. 2 universities offered me jobs as medicinal chemists, professorships. But what happened was one day, a senior corporate officer from the Polaroid Corporation called me and offered me the job to head exploratory research at Polaroid. Job I could not resist, and so I jumped at the opportunity to take this job. And so in 1988, I started working at Polaroid, one of the most innovative places. I got to tell you, in the United States at that time, to be an organic chemist working at Polaroid, if the Bell Labs had kind of gone away, and so Polaroid emerged as the new place to be. And I had a very successful few years, filing a lot of different patents on different technologies, getting into many different things. It was interesting, when I first started at Polaroid, I was so amazed that Edwin Land is one of the United States' most famous inventors, okay? In 1974, he got the Perkin Medal, like was mentioned, the very exciting award, but then they gave it to me in 2014, so how could, really? Anyways, what would a medicinal chemist do at a place like Polaroid? I'm used to studying the chemistry within cells, how organic molecules diffuse and gently do the different things that they do, and yet chemical industry looks so much different. If you think about it, everything we do in industry is at high temperature, high pressure, we put things under harsh conditions, and yet in nature, everything is at room temperature, ambient pressure, using water as salt. So I really got into that, and I started to think about it, and I came up with a theory. And I developed this technology that I call non-covalent derivatization. Non-covalent derivatization is essentially looking at how nature would do things through collaborative intermolecular forces. So essentially, in a way, I call it organic metallurgy. I would make phase diagrams of organic compounds and then come up with complexes and eutectics. And United States patent law recognizes those as new compositions of matter. So my first patent in non-covalent derivatization was in 1991. 20 years later, the US FDA, I'm on their advisory board, has come up with a regulatory guidance for companies that are making co-crystals. The early days of that started as what I was calling non-covalent derivatization. One of my inventions at Polaroid, it's interesting, the Polaroid Corporation, the photographic industry started calling Warner Complex. And the EPA wanted to go to large-scale manufacturing with this invention. Now, in the United States, you don't just stop making something, you have to get approval from the EPA. It's called a low-volume exemption, a pre-manufacturing notification. So it's something that you must do. And so Polaroid sent me on to the US EPA to explain to them what non-covalent derivatization was, because they didn't understand it. I don't have any builds. These things are all just happening as in a different format that is not allowing me to click, because images should be appearing with very complicated slides that are just showing the final form. Is it being presented not in presentation mode? You may see it. So we had to get EPA approval, low volume exemption, pre-manufacturing notification, and the EPA rejected the application, not because of toxicity, not because of environmental impact. They said, small particles, are you crazy? Molecular complexes, are you high? They had no idea what I was talking about. So Polaroid put me on an airplane and sent me to Washington, D.C. to explain to the EPA what this all was. So here it is. I go to the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics in the Washington, D.C. I'm holding a briefcase of overhead transparencies. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm a little bit mad. All right, and I meet the branch chief of the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics, this guy named Polonascus. Wait a minute, I know him. I went to school with him. In fact, I was playing in a jazz band with his older brother at the time. There's his older brother. There's me on the keyboard. There's my older brother with awesome hair. And this guy here, if you've ever been to Las Vegas, the guy who plays Rod Stewart for Legends of Rock was the guitar player back then. Has nothing to do with this talk. I thought it was kind of cool. But anyways, I could say to Polonascus, I could say, wait a minute. Polaroid, we've been manufacturing this technology, all these multi-step syntheses, all these solvents, all this energy, all these things, and here I've come up with an aqueous, one-step process in which multiple molecules coalesce together to go around the necessity of multi-step synthesis. And you're giving me a hard time for something that you should be celebrating, right? Why is it that we're not celebrating that which is good? We're all doing is saying that something that is different is going to be hard. Well, isn't anything better for the environment going to be different? And so if the EPA's policy is saying different is bad, how can we come up with sustainability? So think about that. We're having this intellectual discussion about the EPA and how they regulate chemistry. At exactly the same time, disaster happens in my personal life. Okay, in my personal life, I lose my 2-year-old son, John, to a birth defect. My son John dies of a disease where his liver was completely unattached to his intestines. No one knows the cause of this birth defect. He was given surgery. We had him alive until 2 years old, and then he passed away. And on the night of my son's funeral, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I asked myself, what is something I touched caused my son's birth defect? What is something, maybe one of my awards, one of my big, successful things had something about it that actually hurt my son? And what drove me crazy was not the answer to the question, but the realization that I had no training to answer the question. Here it is. I'm familiar with books like Our Stolen Future that talk about the impact of chemicals on human populations. At this point, I'm probably the most successful industrial organic chemist on the planet. Already synthesized over 2,500 new molecules. And I came to this realization. I have no idea what makes a molecule toxic. I have no idea what makes a molecule hurt the environment. Started thinking about it. There are all kinds of reports about elevated breast cancer mortality among professional chemists, all these things. How is it possible that 4 years of undergraduate education, 4 years of graduate education, I never had a discussion, never had a seminar, never had a class, never had anything in my education to say, before you make a molecule, how do you predict whether it could be harmful for human health and the environment? Yes, I learned how to label waste and when to wear gloves and masks, but that wasn't part of being a chemist. That was kind of the custodial part of chemistry. It was never brought in as an intellectual component. How does one anticipate the negative before you make it? There's so much information out there. And so I looked at it in the United States alone. And every year in the United States, we graduate 15,000 undergraduate students in chemistry, 3,000 master's degrees, 3,000 doctoral degrees. For the first time in history, in 2004, women started becoming chemists more than men. What could be more important to the field of chemistry than understanding the impact of our molecular structure on human health and the environment? And yet, not one university on the planet requires chemists to learn anything about predictive toxicology or predictive negative impact. Wait a minute, we chemists, the only people in the world who understand molecular structure, and it's not part of our culture, that's not part of who we are as chemists, this is a problem. So Paul and I realized we didn't need a philosophy, we didn't need a social movement, we didn't need some Chem Review article or some science article espousing, new theories of things. We needed to intrinsically change and create a new science. And a new science has journals, has textbooks, has classes, has conferences, has workshops. And that was the birth of green chemistry. Industrial chemist working at Polaroid and a regulator working at the EPA. We wrote this book, and I joked that had I thought anyone was ever going to read this book, we would have written a better book. But it really kind of started. You pick up the book and you turn the pages, and you say, yeah, that's obvious. Yeah, that's obvious. That's obvious. And you wait for something brilliant. It's all obvious. Chemists should know before they make something whether it's going to impact negatively on human health and the environment. But the point, when you hear about the circular economy, when you hear about cradle to cradle, when you hear about biomimicry, when you hear about all these things that evaluate defining what a technology does, green chemistry is different in that it talks about what the chemistry is. It's the invention of something new. If you are not inventing something new, you're not doing green chemistry. Green chemistry isn't a mechanism to evaluate what you're doing today. It's a way of inventing something from the design of chemical products and processes that use in generation value. The word design is the most important word. And then, so essentially, then we looked at what was happening in the world and how to codify this. And again, there are so many people putting out their principles of this, that, and the other thing, and it's all good, but these things are very, very meaningful principles. that you can find and identify all kinds of real-world applications of them, of how one, if you haven't been trained in toxicology or environmental mechanisms, what do you do? And so this is essentially a way to approach that. And so you won't find these as something that a trade group, like a meeting of the circular economy, would never put these slides up, because it talks about protective groups. It talks about, you know, activation energy. It speaks to the chemist on what we can do as the molecular basis of sustainability. So it's not a sales gimmick. It's not another thing to say, oh, you know, getting people to work it. This is a fundamental piece of what it means to be a chemist. Okay, and so now here it is, 2019, Monash University has this $80 million Green Chemistry Center. ACS has the Green Chemistry Institute. They have the Green Chemistry Institute. The United Nations has a Green Chemistry Initiative. University of York. You know, all these consumer companies. L'Oreal draws a picture. It's not a very good picture of polyanalysis, and has a video to their suppliers about their commitment to green chemistry. There's the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council. This is an international organization of 180 consumer-facing companies that have written a document saying, we feel that the employees of the future, the chemistry of the future, must adopt the principles of green chemistry. This year has been my most flattering thing. The Ministry of Economic Affairs in Berlin named a building, the John Warner Center for Green Chemistry in Berlin. So it's just amazing what's happening. There are now over 12 different journals dedicated to green chemistry, over 50 textbooks of green chemistry. Now almost 70 universities worldwide have signed the green chemistry commitment, saying that they're going to find some way to get green chemistry into the required curriculum, not as an elective. We need to redefine what it means to be a chemist. And that understanding impacts to human health and the environment isn't someone else's job. It's our job. Because now all of a sudden it redefines successful business practices. Pike Research did an evaluation. This is very old. And they did an evaluation saying by 2020, green chemistry would be a $100 billion megatrend. It was $100 billion last year. It's already ahead of this curve. Okay, and so this is a no-brainer industrially. You just know that the world is waking up and desire for sustainability is increasing, but their understanding of what that means is not keeping up with the desire. Green chemistry provides an unambiguous definition. Right? So to me, the definition of green chemistry is removing hazard from society. So yes, it has to be better from a sustainability perspective, from a toxicity perspective. That's not enough, okay? It has to succeed in the marketplace. And for it to succeed in the marketplace, it has to perform better than other technologies, and it has to cost better than other technologies. And so for something to be green chemistry, it performs better, it costs better, and oh, by the way, here is the environmental benefit. But history has shown time and time again, if you lead with, oh, this is green and you should buy it because you're a good person, unfortunately that hasn't happened yet. Hopefully our society evolves someday that does happen. But right now in 2019, that's not the way it's happening. And so we have to hit them with performance and cost and oh, by the way. So when some organization comes to me and says, John, you know, we have to go beyond green chemistry. We're in the real world. We have to worry about performance and cost. I go, no, they didn't read the book. Because the whole point is that if you are dependent on governmental subsidies or you're shaming people that they should buy that, that's not sustainable. Things change quickly. Look at us. We've gone from Obama to Trump. And so overnight, our environmental regulations in the United States were completely redefined. Depending on policies of government help, but they're not sustainable. We scientists, we chemists, we engineers, got to get back in the lab, and we got to invent things that work better, cost better, and are better for the environment. Then we're doing green chemistry. All right? And so after my career at Polaroid was going amazingly, I was about to be promoted to a wonderful position. I chose to quit because I felt this isn't as much an industrial issue as it is an issue facing the field of chemistry. And so I went into academia, and so I was chair of chemistry, director of biochemistry, full professor of plastics engineering in the UMass system, and we started the world's first PhD program in green chemistry. Everything in a normal chemistry program, but we added a class in mechanistic toxicology. We added a class in environmental mechanisms. We added a class in government policy. And you know what? All the chemistry programs that I was involved in the very first year, this got more applications. More students were excited to take this than any other chemistry program. And the average GPA of the students applying to this were much higher. The best and brightest students care. They care. And so over the next 10 years, 120 students passed through this program at different levels. The average time it took one of the students to get a job in industry, 2 days. The longest any student spent looking for a job upon graduation of this was about 2 weeks because she had 6 job offers and she couldn't pick between them. I've been out of academia for 12 years. I still get phone calls every week. John, you've got somebody, because they know how to do chemistry, like every university on the planet. But unlike every university on the planet, they understand how to predict toxicology. They understand how to look at the impacts on the environment and what sustainability means and all these drivers that are pulling us that no one knows what to do with. All right? And so to me, the way I look at it, of all the products and processes in the world today, the ceiling tiles, the carpeting, the electronics, the textiles, I would argue that maybe 10% of a 90% of everything we do today, someone has a problem with. Now, sometimes these problems are very serious. Sometimes these problems aren't so serious. But we've got a lot of work to do. If you do a search and you look in the supply chain and you try to find something that exists today, you may be successful maybe 25% of the time. But right now, in 2019, I would argue 65 to 70% of the technologies haven't been invented yet. This isn't some battle of good and evil. Industry and environmentalism at odds with each other. They just don't exist. So why is it that every 14-year-old, 15-year-old child on the planet doesn't dream of being a chemist and learning how to invent these future things? Why is it that every 14-year-old thinks chemists are the problem? That we are the bad guys? What are we doing wrong? There is no path to sustainability that doesn't go through chemistry. And we're doing a very bad job explaining that to society. And so chemists have always cared about human health. And this isn't the birth of ethics. I believe that people who have never heard of green chemistry, of course they care about ethics. But something different. When I became a chemist, I asked professors, and this is kind of interesting, thinking of what happened in my family. I asked the professors, is chemistry dangerous? If I choose chemistry as a field, will I somehow expose myself and my future family to risk? You know what the professor said to me? If you're asking questions like that, you probably shouldn't be a chemist. Okay, I didn't for a couple of years. But it's not that he was bad. He felt, like many people do, chemistry has to be dangerous. But it's okay, because we'll wear gloves to protect our skin. We'll wear masks to protect our lungs. We'll wear goggles to protect our eyes. We'll install scrubbers and filters to protect the air, the land, the sea. That it's okay, we've got it covered. Now the problem with this, of course, is that it works until it doesn't. Right? Every disaster that we hear about, if you went to Bhopal the day before Bhopal happened and say, we got it covered, look at all of our safeguards to protect. The thing is that when you deal with risk, there are two approaches. When you could approach it by dealing with the exposure, or you can deal with it with an intrinsic hazard level. And what we've been doing for 60 years is almost exclusively focusing on exposure, coming up with nice ways to make sure that these bad molecules don't make it to people in the environment. That is very, very expensive. That slows down innovation very much. But if instead we focus on looking at the intrinsic hazard, last 20 years of toxicology, of environmental health sciences, we can look at a molecule and say, okay, if we move the methyl group from here to here, it's no longer a neurotoxin. We put a carbonyl over here, it's not going to be a carcinogen. We can start thinking about these things in the design. And the cool thing about it, it's the only approach to pollution prevention and sustainability that reduces costs and becomes more profitable because of all the exposure stuff that is traditionally spent. You know, if a company is dealing with a hazardous material, they have to worry about storage, transportation, treatment, disposal, regulatory, liability, work out, on and on and on. My God, it's just part of the business. They have to put all this cost embedded because there's regulatory problems, because there's exposure problems. Yep. And so here are the federal regulations imposed by the U.S. federal government since 1870. You can see not a whole lot happened. In 1962, the year I was born, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, and you can see that there's all of a sudden a pretty new trend. The single biggest impediment to commercial success today is understanding the landscape of the regulatory environment. What's happening locally, what's happening nationally, what's happening internationally. More products become too costly to do because of this than any other subject. And yet, still, we don't know how to deal with it. DuPont is a great example. About 5 years ago, DuPont's R&D budget was $1 billion a year. That same year, DuPont's environmental compliance budget was $1 billion a year. So the CEO says, from now on, I want all my scientists to only invent non-toxic, non-regulated stuff will save a ton of money. But not one of those scientists have ever had a class in toxicology. Not one of those scientists have ever had any training in green chemistry. The desire is there, the ability is not. So still now in 2019, a region, a country that really gets around this and says, we're going to change the way we educate our scientists. This isn't just an environmental, moral, and ethical thing. This is immediate productivity and competitiveness on how to get to market and to compete on a global scale when it comes to sustainability. So to me, sustainability is an overarching theme that covers everything on the planet. Sustainable economics, sustainable everything. Sustainable chemistry is a subset that still is huge. Chemical policies, remediation, exposure, green chemistry. Green chemistry, to me, is a subset of sustainable chemistry that doesn't focus on what the technology does, but focuses on what the technology is. Okay, so it looks at the solvents, it looks at the catalyst, it looks at the feedstock, it looks at the toxicity and the persistence. And there are 12 principles of green chemistry. That's probably the best way to do it, is each of the 12. But that's the point, that green chemistry is the molecular science of sustainability. Someone in marketing can participate in sustainability. They can't really do green chemistry because you need to know what molecules are. It is the role that we chemists play in this very larger picture. But if we have no training in this, if we are putting students out into society and sending them to industry and not arming them with the skills, we're giving them a disadvantage because other universities are. Okay, and so I look at the world as a set of toolboxes. Okay, and so we have a toolbox for the chemical enterprises, each driving some chemical transformation, carbon-forming reactions, oxidations, reductions, whatever. Now, imagine, I've already said this is 10% full, 90% empty. Okay, the green chemistry toolbox is missing all these transformations. I believe that an individual, a company, a developing country will open the green chemistry toolbox. Remember my definition, better performance, better cost, and oh, by the way, better for the environment. But unfortunately, 90% of the time that the green chemistry toolbox gets open, it's empty. So what do people do? They rush. The investors want something by next quarter, so they close the green chemistry toolbox. They open the traditional one. They say, what is it going to cost for the gloves and the masks and all the different things like that? And they do business as usual. This is our opportunity. So in 2004, I was called the United States #1 science professor. I got another really wonderful award, spent a half an hour in the Oval Office with President Bush. And just like when I was at Polaroid, it was at this point that I decided to leave academia. I left UMass. Now, why did I leave UMass? I wanted to be an inventor again. And working with the university, I found a lot of difficulties. But more importantly, what happened, one experience that I had that was very strange. Because I'm an entertaining speaker, every science writer, every week I get a phone call asking for a quote from some magazine or some organization. And so when Canada, the company of Canada, banned Nalgene bottles because of bisphenol A, they called me. I was driving in my car. I'm a good citizen, so I pulled over to the side of the road so I wouldn't be driving and talking. And I went in the parking lot of a grocery store. And while I'm in the grocery store, a pregnant woman comes up. And she's struggling with her bags, looking at the keys, and she takes her cash register receipt and she puts it in her mouth. And my head goes, boom. You know what drives me crazy? Here we are, we're talking about plastic bottles with femtogram quantities of bisphenol A. If you hold on to a thermal cash register receipt for 30 seconds, you will exceed exposure of a lifetime of drinking out of plastic bottles. Why are we talking about plastic bottles when the really big problem is these thermal cash registers? They said, calm down, John, calm down. This is the story on plastic bottles. And they wrote the story on plastic, but they mentioned John Warner reveals bisphenol A in cash register receipts. I didn't reveal anything. They were always there. Next thing you know, oh my God, over 1,000 websites, John Warner reveals bisphenol A. I got 9 countries calling me, asking me, what about these cash register receipts? The most famous radio program on National Public Radio, On Point, they had me on talking about this thing. This world-class journal, on the same page as a cat pushing a shopping garage, had John Warner revealed bisphenol A. It's like, I'm looking at that cat and I'm saying, it's time for a career change here. You know, it's a lifetime of working on inventing solutions. No one cares. The one time by accident I mention a problem and I get more attention. Those who identify problems in our society get more attention than those who solve them. And unfortunately, we've just got to live with that. All right? And so I left UMass and I started the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry. The Warner Babcock Institute, this is Jim Babcock. He's an investment banker. He is my partner. We have a 42,000 square foot research facility. It's about 4,000 square meters. Every piece of chemistry, chemical engineering, and then analytical equipment under one roof, about 30 of the most brilliant people I could hire. And we just invent stuff that are green chemistry. Okay, and so essentially what we try to do is combine science and business to do. We're not an incubator. I call us a technology greenhouse. And in the last 9 years, we've filed 251 published. These are the ones that have made it to publication, patent applications of different technologies. And I just want to, we've worked with over 100 multinational companies. I never talk about the things I do with companies, but if you do a search of my patents and the names of these companies, you will find in publications patents that I have invented that have licensed to these organizations. But these ones here, like I said, I don't feel comfortable talking about them outside. So we also do what we call in our technology greenhouse, the things that we spin out ourselves. Okay, and so we do some pharmaceuticals and life sciences, we do adhesives, coatings and composites, cosmetics and personal care, water and recycling, electronics and energy. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of some of the technologies that we've done in just the last 4 years. These are just in the last 4 years. Okay, we have an ALS drug in clinical trials that we started a company called Procipra. Okay, and that we're very excited that it's in phase 2 clinical trial, where we've taken using non-covalent derivatization, we've increased the oral bioavailability of this molecule. We also have an HDAC inhibitor, a series of molecules that again we've increased the oral bioavailability of them. There are about 5 other pharmaceutical companies that we're in the process of spinning out in diabetes and ALS and Alzheimer's. But these are the 2 examples. In adhesives, coatings, and composites, we have an asphalt technology that allows you to recycle 100% of your asphalt pavement. Right now, the sun and the air oxidize and make brittle the surface of asphalt pavement. So what you end up having to do is send it to a landfill. But using the technology that we have, we now can have it done. We started a company called Collaborative Aggregates. We went through the U.S. federal government's required testing for 2 years. And after this, it came out with all thumbs up. So now 37 states in the United States have approved this for work on asphalt roads. It's got Delta S is the stuff, the additive that you put in the roads, and Delta Mist is a spray coat that you put on top of it. We can also, instead of using recycled asphalt, we can increase the utility of other materials, whether they are waste plastics or rubbers or other kinds of technologies. We've found that by combining them with our technology, we can make increase the use of these things. We worked with Adidas. We created for Adidas their ocean plastic shoe made out of ocean trash. They sent us the trash, and I had 14 days to come up with a process to separate the nylon from the polypropylene, to separate the pigments, and to separate the heavy metals. They wanted it extruded to a site that I didn't have the right extruder for, so we actually built the extruder. And in the course of 10 or 14 days, we sent it to Germany, to Adidas, and they made their first run. So all these shoes that were out there, that process was invented at WBI in collaboration with Adidas in 2 weeks, using the principles of green chemistry. We have a wood composite technology. We can make OSB, particle board, straw board, any kind of engineered wood component, not a drop of formaldehyde, not a drop of MDI, all green chemistry, new adhesive. It outperforms each of the different technologies in performance, but it's also on parity and cost. We call that entropic composites. We have, in cosmetics, we have a hair color system that essentially, this is really cool. I really love this. What it is made, and then made after. It actually, that is the color my hair was 30 years ago. This doesn't color your hair. It interrupts nature's mechanism. You put the material into your hair, and then it takes over, so that someone who had black hair that's gone gray, their hair goes black. Someone with brown hair goes brown. It's a hair color restoration. It is the exact human pigment that I had 30 years ago. It doesn't wash out, it doesn't fade, it does grow up. And so a guy named Paul Hawken said, okay, gee whiz, it's like a fingerprint. Your hair has a hairprint. He started a company 4 years ago called Hairprint. And right now, online, if you go to hairprint.com, it's $39.99. If you're that quick, they'll throw in a knife or something. But it's a thing, and it's been working. We have this novel, cool system of triggered surfactants. And again, I know I'm running out of time, so I want to be here, but essentially invented a series of photospiropyrans that we put a long chain on, that essentially we can either take a material that's not a surfactant, put it in an electric field, and bang, turn it into a surfactant, or take a system that is a surfactant and deactivate it so that we can do depositions, control reaction schemes, do the whole platform of material with these novel photo-triggered systems. We have water harvesting technologies. We have a set of polymers that this is an oversimplification, but imagine you have a rowboat on the ocean with an umbrella on top. Polymer underneath that when the sun is out, water absorbs on the underside of the umbrella. And when the sun goes down, it rains pure water in the rowboat. This is an oversimplification. We have this working in millisecond cycles. So we can actually do this in the shadow of a windmill to harvest and release, capture and release water, to essentially create water harvesting in either desalination models or in arid environments. In the same way, we have what I've invented, I call it photo-forward osmosis. These polymers that have the triggers on them. So I synthesize the polymer to be barely water soluble, and then I put these photo triggers that in an electric field or in the sun, they become water soluble. We have a membrane. When the sun comes out, the polymer dissolves. When the polymer dissolves, the osmotic pressure increases, and it pulls pure water from the dirty water. When the sun goes down, the polymers precipitate, and you pump out the pure material. Then the next day, it starts all over again. I've been able to do this again in a diurnal 8-hour cycle, but also using LEDs to drive microreactors to do this super fast. Okay. We have taken lithium, we've taken limonene from citrus. We hydrolyze it 50%. We put it in water. We take the right frequency mixing of it, and we can make, by flotation, we can separate out pure lithium cobalt from lithium batteries. I think I only got 1 or 2 examples left. One of them is working with DARPA. We've come up with, we can direct lithographically deposit titanium dioxide channels. There's no added, there's no other material other than what we do is we take the particles of lithium, of titanium dioxide. I put on these photoresists that when you hit it with a laser, it creates a coagulation. And that coagulation is so strong, and it's an anatase form, that you end up having photoactivated channels. And finally, we have a new solar technology. It's called ambient photonics. It's not for outdoor use. It's for indoor use, for the Internet of Things. That we have these little strips that if you have it on the back of your phone, you never plug your phone in ever again. It's an indoor photovoltaic. Now, with all these examples that I've just exhaustively gone through, I never said green. I never said sustainable. I talked about products that should be viable on the marketplace because of their performance, cost, and something cool that they do. That is green chemistry. You don't green up a technology. You make an excellent technology, and you make it green at the same time. So a pharmaceutical scientist who does green chemistry is a better pharmaceutical scientist. Someone in the electronics industry that does green chemistry is better in electronics. It's not a thing on itself. It's part of the fabric of what we call chemistry. Why I'm so excited being here is because the Taiwanese Chemical Industry Association and the companies that I've met, you have everything here to just take a quantum leap in green chemistry. You're already doing it a little bit. Oh my God, you have the capacity and the ability to completely change everything, to get this integrated to K through 12, to get it integrated into the universities, and just do amazing things. Thank you for letting me have a part of this.